So basically I'm just going to give a brief introduction to my artistic background to give a little bit of context about how I work and why, what led me to working with glass and Max in particular, and then I will look at a brief look at my very messy performance patch, and then looking at some of my more recent installation work and how I use Max, and I'll give you a small demonstration of how that works as well. Okay, so my artistic background, basically I started playing bass guitar about 30 years ago, and played in quite a lot of bands, most of which you will have never heard of. I think probably the only band that some people might have heard of, and it's very niche, is a band that I was in when I was about 19 or 20 called Cindy Talk, which is still actually going. This band here is a band that I was in 2003 called Lishka. Over there in the corner, that's me. I think PA would probably disagree with me, but I find that bass players don't really get that much attention. So we did actually have a drummer though, and she is there somewhere, but she didn't make it into any of the photographs. So I think I actually did quite well because I actually made it into that photo. Anyway, I played in quite a few bands, and then around about 2007 decided that I really wanted to make music on my own. If anybody's seen any kind of rock documentaries like Anvil, for example, that might give you a small indication of why I didn't want to be in bands anymore. But anyway, so I started recording and performing. I started recording in 2007 under the ridiculously titled These Feathers Have Plumes moniker. And I started working with bass, because that was the instrument that I've been playing for a long time. And then I started to work with glass, basically. I'll explain a little bit about that in a bit. The first piece that I actually made for glass was this piece here, which I'm going to play a little snippet of, called Glass Heart, and that was released in 2009. And just to give an indication of basically what kind of equipment I was working with at the time, I recorded that on a £15 condenser microphone from Maplin, a digital dictaphone, and then I just manipulated it and mixed it in Audacity. So at that point I'd never even heard of MaxMSP, I don't think, or I had actually, but I didn't think that I could use it. So sorry, I'm just now going to play a little bit of that just to give you an indication of what kind of stuff that I was working with with glass at the time. Okay, so that's basically where I started when I started working with glass. Okay, why glass? I heard somebody, I think somebody that I knew told me about the glass harmonica, which was a glass instrument invented by Benjamin Franklin in the 1760s. And I heard a recording of this instrument, and I just thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, and I really, really wanted to play one. But at the time, there was only one commercial manufacturer in the world, and that was Finkenbeiner in Philadelphia. And they were making them, but I think at that time they were retailing at about, I don't know, $8,000–9,000. So obviously I wasn't going to be able to buy one of those. So I started collecting small wine glasses, basically from charity shops and things like that. I have now got a very, very large collection of different sized and shaped glasses. But yeah, this is a replica of the Franklin harmonica, which is, as I said, at Benjamin Franklin House in London. I've actually sort of visited there, and they did let me play on it. It was very exciting. And I think they think that one was from the 1990s. I don't think Finkenbeiner are making them anymore. There is a strange story about Gerhard Finkenbeiner, who was making them. Apparently, I think he went missing. I don't think he's ever been found. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I don't think they're still making them. Their website is still there, but there's no information. I think they seem to have stopped making them about 2012. There are people that are making them, but normally, you know, making their own kind of versions of them, basically. So hearing that was what got me interested in working with glass. And as I said, because that kind of instrument was really out of the question for me, I started using wine glasses. Here's a picture of me, my 15 minutes of fame there in the Northwest Evening Mail when I played at Full of Noises Festival in Barrow-in-Furness. That was 2015. And I will talk about some of the electronics I was using at the time. As you can see, it's pretty kind of basic analog equipment. I was using a really shit pitch shifter pedal from, I think it was a Behringer one, which just kept breaking, and a looper and reverb. I really like reverb. I use far too much reverb. It's definitely something that I probably shouldn't use quite so gratuitously, but I do. Anyway, yeah, so that was the kind of setup that I was using until relatively recently. I had heard, I think actually I was telling John this earlier, the first time I saw anybody use Max was actually John. I think it was in about 2007, 2008, and I didn't quite know what you were doing, but I think you were using a cardboard box or something similar, and I just thought this was amazing. And I was with my friend Dan, who was one of the guitarists that I was in a band with, and I said, I'd really like to learn that, and he laughed. That was fair enough, because he'd seen me struggle to kind of put together some pedals and a mixer, so I can totally understand why he found that quite funny. But it was something that I kept thinking about, and I did end up using Max later on. Again, this is just a sort of another kind of, to give you an idea of the kind of equipment that I was using, very lo-fi, basically, fairly cheap equipment. That I have a regular collaborative project with my friend Sharon Gal, and that's a still from a video. I have actually got that, but I might play that a bit later. Okay, this slide is in answer to the question that I get asked every single time I play a gig. No, I don't drink out of them. No, I have never drunk out of them. And no, I probably never will. So I just thought I'd slip that in there. Okay. What led me to working with Max? Well, as I said, I saw John play with it a long time ago. Thought it looked really fantastic. Using the analog effects I was using was problematic for me on multiple levels. What I really liked about the glass was the kind of very pure quality of the sound, and using those kind of cheap effects pedals, basically it was very difficult to get that because they're really noisy, especially reverb pedals and using spring reverbs and stuff like that. And I was really struggling to get the kind of amplitude that I needed to play live. And as well as that, I was kind of really fed up of carrying around these very heavy, bulky bits of equipment. So I started using larger wine glasses. So actually, the bulky pedals ended up being a really small problem because the glasses got very, very big, and they were much more problematic to carry around with me. But anyway, as I said, there were all these problems that I kept thinking, well, I think, you know, it's the equipment I'm using. I was using a lot of contact microphones as well. So I decided that I really, really wanted to learn how to use MaxMSP. And in 2012, I started, I had not been to university when I was younger. I went and basically lived in a squat and played in a band instead. So I decided in 2012 to sort of start what I term as my sort of ongoing midlife crises by going and doing a music degree. So I did a BSc in Music Technology, Sound for Media, which is ostensibly a sound design degree, at London Metropolitan University. And I started to use Max, and I started to work with sound installation, which is something that I'd been really interested in. I think probably the first time I thought about working in that way myself, actually, was I saw a piece by Janet Cardiff, and I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. And I thought, you know, I'd really like to kind of work with sound installation, basically, rather than carry on performing. Or actually, at that time, I thought about doing both together. But I carried on doing quite a lot of live performance stuff. So, as I said, getting away from using the noisy effects pedals, I decided to build myself an effects unit, basically. And really, the way that shaped was very similar to the kind of things that I was using with the pedals. So I wanted pitch control, I wanted reverb and looping. That led to me getting better hardware, and it gave me a lot more control over the problems that I was having, basically with getting a hot signal but without so much noise. So I started working on this live patch around about the same time that I started working with sound installation, so it was about 2015, I think. Okay, I have got the patch here, but I just thought I'd give you some screenshots of it. I mean, it's really cobbled together from other people's stuff. I spent a lot of time at that point looking at the Max boards, and usually the answers to the questions that I was looking for came from either Alex Harker or Rodrigo Constanza. So it's quite interesting that I've ended up here. But yeah, so the patch itself is very, very basic. Really what you've got is my inputs here, so my microphones, contact microphones, and I will explain how I use those in a bit. And then over here I've got frequency shifting and a lot of reverb and then a looper. So it pretty much mirrored the kind of setup that I was using with my effects pedals, but in Max. And that's just really, that shows you sort of what's going on. There's, as I said, frequency shifting, reverb. It's very, very simple. And yeah. So in 2016, I was finishing off my undergraduate degree, and my final project, basically I had to build an interactive sound installation, and that had to be with Max and Jitter. And I really wanted to do something that kind of was more creative in terms of, sort of working with the kind of materials and sounds that I was working in outside of my life at university. So I built an interactive sound installation, which really just had a very simple video mixer, because I was working quite a lot with film at that point as well, and working with amplitude. So unfortunately, I didn't, when it was exhibited for 2 weeks, but I failed completely to actually do any video documentation of that project. So I can't actually show you how it actually looked, but we will have a look at some of the output from that. But yeah, so the installation itself had 6 very large wine glasses on a table. Each one had one of these PVDF tabs, which is what I use, which are a kind of contact microphone. And these are the sort of size glasses that I'm working with, although this is not actually the largest glass that I use. And I was inviting the members of the public basically to play the glass harp. So there were 6 of these on the table, and the amplitude from the playing of the glasses basically was triggering a video mixer. I got quite a lot of mileage out of that piece, because I went on and made a live performance version of that, which I played in Manchester in 2016. And then later I made a fixed media AV version of that. And then last year, Metapraxis Ensemble in London, basically somehow they'd seen the piece and they asked me if they could perform it live, which was an interesting concept to me, because it's something that nobody had ever asked me. Nobody had ever asked me, could we perform a piece of your music? So I really had to kind of think about how to do that, and there wasn't really a score, so I had to work with them to give them something that was usable, and they did, and it was really lovely. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but they did send me some footage of that. This is the patch that I used for the installation, which I have got here, as I said, and if I got time. I did completely forget to look at what time I started, so I've no idea what time I have to finish. Around half past, okay, that's fine. So this is basically the installation patch. I do have that here, and again, if there's time at the end, I might open that up, although I don't really want to show you it, because underneath the hood it's a fucking mess, and it's really quite cranky and it does some weird things, as I discovered the other day when I opened it up. But if there's time, we'll have a quick look at it. But over here, basically, it's just all my ins here for the contact microphones. This is just a very basic video mixer. So the main film at the back here is 6 women playing wine glasses, and then the amplitude was triggering a separate film basically for each glass, and people could control that in the room basically by how they chose to play the glasses. So I'll play a little bit of the video from the sort of fixed media piece, because it'll just give you an idea really of how that sounded and how that looked. So basically it's a jitter fade basically. So each film is triggered, as I said, by a particular glass, and that just fades in and out basically. I'll just move that on a little bit. It goes on for quite a long time. That just gives you an idea of basically what that was actually like. So basically, as I said, I at that point I was kind of working with film, and I really intended to carry on doing that. And then I came here to do a master's, which accidentally turned into a PhD. As I said, really just a sort of extension of my ongoing midlife crises. But basically, I started off thinking that I was going to carry on working with performance. And then I realised that I really, really hated performing. And I've been trying to do it for a very long time. I mean, I've been performing for 30 years, but as a solo artist, I started doing that in, I think my first solo gig was 2009. And I kept on doing it, and I kept thinking, at some point, you're going to enjoy it. And I didn't. So in 2018, I thought, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to make sound installation. And I found that so much more rewarding, particularly when I did the final piece at my undergraduate degree. I really enjoyed being able to be in the room and watch people interacting with my work, and them not knowing that it was my work. And so they could be completely honest about it, and they could play with it and enjoy it. And it was just such a different kind of feeling for me, and one that I much preferred. I'm quite a nervous performer as well. I just used to get really nervous and worry about screwing it up. And I was just never, ever really happy with how it sounded live. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to stop doing it. So I did my last gig in January 2018. I'm not saying I'm never going to do it again, but I think it was, you know, starting to really work with the sound installation, and really having to kind of sort of define what my PhD was going to be about, made me think, okay, I'm going to park that for now. So as I said, never say never, but at the moment I'm not doing live performances, and I'm really enjoying not doing them. So, but I'm really enjoying making sound installations. So in 2018, I'd had this idea that I wanted to make an automated version of a glass harp, very similar to my live setup, but without me having to perform it. And that had been in my mind for quite a long time. And I was very disappointed when I went to a sound art festival a few years ago, and I heard this really gorgeous noise, and I knew it was glass, and I walked into the room and someone had done it before me, and done a really good job of it. It's a guy called Timothy Didymus. Really beautiful installation, you should check out his work. But anyway, when I started to work on what became Partita for Unattended Glass Harp, I knew what I wanted to do, and I had to spend quite a long time kind of working out how to get the glasses to sing on their own. And for various reasons, I mean, one, I didn't really want to copy what Timothy had done. And he did it so beautifully, I just didn't think that I could really improve upon that. And secondly, because of the equipment that I was using, he's using rotating turntables, and he's basically exciting the glasses with pieces of cork on tone arms, and it works perfectly, but it's quite different to what I'm doing because I am using the electronics, I am using effects and things like that, and he wasn't. He was using the acoustic properties of the glass. So I spent a lot of time basically trying to work out how I was going to do that. And yes, a lot of failed experiments and a lot of glue. At home I have a really large box of things called the box of failed experiments, and it's just full of crap basically, of things that I've thought that will make a really good noise and then found out it hasn't. So at the moment there's a lot of glue in there, and there's a lot of small transducers. So as I've said there, I settled on basically resonating the glasses through the use of vibration speakers, and I will demonstrate that in a little while. And that worked really well, but I had to sort of find out what kind of speakers worked, and yes, and the glue was a problem because when you're basically using this kind of transducer, which hopefully I can hold up, you know, they can get quite warm, and if you've got this stuck to a glass and that's warm, it's going to warm up and it's going to warm the glue up and it's going to slip. And it's really important basically to have the transducer in the right place, the antinode basically, is that what it is? Yeah, to basically make the glass vibrate properly and get the kind of sound that you want. So yes, I think I've got a slide of my collection of glue, which I'll show you in a minute. In terms of the composition of the pieces, I think one of the things that I really struggled with my live performances was, because I was very nervous about doing it, I've really filled the space very quickly and used looping and things like that, and there really wasn't much space in what I was doing because I was absolutely terrified of silence, because unlike being in a band where there's, you know, 4 or 5 other people that can pick up the pieces if you drop a bum note or something, I was there on my own and it was terrifying. So it was something I'd really been thinking about. So I think when I started working with these installations, that was something that really kind of came to the fore. And also I was kind of, you know, quite influenced by a lot of kind of long form pieces of music, somebody like Eliane Radigue, for example. And the first one, Partita for Unattended Glass Harp 1, was 8 hours. And the reason it's 8 hours is because literally we exhibited that as a group of students. We exhibited here, and we decided that we were going to play those installations over 8 hours. And that didn't mean that the piece had to be 8 hours, but I thought, well, you know, I've got 8 hours, I'm going to make a piece of music that's 8 hours, so I did. And then actually that's pretty much what I did with the second piece. I had a 2-hour slot and I ended up making a 2-hour piece. Whether I'll carry on doing things in that way is debatable, but anyway. Partita 1 was for 3 glasses and Partita 2 was for 6. Workflow, yeah, basically, I mean, just go through that quite briefly, but normally an installation starts off looking a bit like this. This fantastic graphic here. So it's really me kind of thinking about the process, how I was going to do this. Knew that I needed to get a sine wave out of at the resonant frequency of the glass into the glass, and that I wanted to send an audio signal into my max patch, which had my frequency shifting, my reverb, and that kind of thing. Oops, that is a picture of some of the glasses that I have at home. I've got a lot. And I mean, one of the first things that I'm going to do when I work on a composition is work out which glasses sound good with each other. And these glasses are made for things like flower arrangements. They're not made for this purpose. So, you know, it's quite hit and miss. I can't go out and find one that has the frequency that I want. I have to kind of collect them and work through them, find out what their fundamental frequencies are and how they sound with each other. Over at the top there, actually, those are some cake covers. I'm going to be working with those quite soon. So yeah, I don't just work with wine glass shapes, but I tend to use those. That's my glue. Got quite a lot of glue. If anyone needs any glue, let me know. Also got a lot of tape, sticky tape, like double-sided tape, clamps. Yeah. Yeah, so they don't break very often, but obviously if you're sending quite a sort of hot sine wave signal into a glass for a long period of time, this can happen. This was the first installation, and I was using 10 watt speakers, I think. They were probably a little bit too heavy they were definitely too heavy in terms of weight, because I had a real problem keeping them stuck on the glass and was sliding off and things like that. So I've ended up using much lighter ones, and also learning not to overdrive the amp. So this has only ever happened once, so hopefully it won't happen again. It wasn't, I thought it'd be quite spectacular. It wasn't, it just sort of went pfft. So that, which is good, because obviously if you're displaying something like this in a public place, you don't want those to explode and hurt people. So yeah. Right, basically in terms of the sort of composition, really I do use Max in pretty much every aspect of this work. So this is a really simple patch, and it's just lots of cycles. And I was looking at the resonant frequencies of the fundamental frequencies of each glass, and really just kind of messing around with sine tones and working out what sounded nice with each other. It's really very, very simple. This is a sort of score. In my other life, I'm a bookkeeper, so I work with spreadsheets quite a lot, and why not use a spreadsheet for composition, basically? So this really, I mean, it's difficult to describe what's going on here, but these are my frequency shifts, and these are kind of timed events. It makes sense to me, and I wouldn't ever expect anyone else to use this. So talking about Max, which is obviously what I'm supposed to be talking about, and I realise I haven't got that much time left, but with these two installations, obviously there's two things going on. As I said, I've got my transducers, which are vibrating the glasses. So there's timed events. I'm switching those transducers on and off and fading them in and out at specific times. And to do that, I've got lots and lots of very large coal lists. I am absolutely sure that there are other ways of doing this, but basically for me, it works. It takes me a long time, but it works. So yeah. And then the other part of the patch is my pitched events. So I'm looking at telling the Max patch basically to shift the frequency up or down, depending on the glass and whereabouts in the composition. Again, it's a timed frequency change, so I've got a lot of coal lists. And again, really just falling back and relying on exactly the same effects that I've been using for a very long time: pitch shifting, reverb and EQ. At some point, I will look at doing something else, because obviously I know that, you know, there's a huge box of tricks there, and I have got the Flucoma tools as well. I could probably have a look. I know I should be having a look at those, because I'm pretty sure there's some really interesting things that I can work with there. But I think at the moment, you know, what I've got works, so I'm just carrying on using it. This is the user interface of the patch, of the installation, and it's again really, really simple. I've got my inputs up here, so basically the PVDF tabs I use going in here. I've got my transducers, basically they're on or off, and then I've got my reverb, because as I said, I really like reverb. So that's what it looks like underneath, and I will open that when I show it in a second. But yeah, I mean, again, it's, as I said, it's really, really simple. It's inputs up here, feeding into my event schedulers for my pitched events, and then down here, these are my cycles, basically sending out the sine waves at the resonant frequencies into each glass, and that's pretty much it, really. This is Partita 2, which I showed here at Electric Spring last year. So yeah, I think one of the things that I've found most problematic actually is the amount of equipment I have to use. You know, when I started using Max, I thought it would be the answer to my prayers in terms of not having to carry around loads of equipment, but I just seem to like to make life really complicated, and it's got bigger and bigger. And I'm having to use 2 Motus at the moment, because I need so many outs basically for the transducers. And I haven't really found one box that can do everything I need. So yeah, currently got 2. It's great. Okay, demonstration of Partita. Okay, I also do have a film of that, which I'll show in a moment. As I said, basically I've got this transducer and this fantastically lo-fi crap car amp. Basically, again, haven't really found another way to drive these that's slightly less precarious, because they do break quite easily, but so far they've been okay. They're like 20 quid or something. So that's basically coming out. Let me open this up. So yeah, basically here, this is one glass, one transducer, and I know that the fundamental frequency of this glass is 314, so I'm sending out a sine tone at that frequency. And as I said, there's actually a lot of kind of coalesce going on here. I've got my tie. Basically, yeah, I'm telling it when I want it to go on, when I want it to go off. So there's a time map. That's just literally on, off, on, off. So yeah, if anyone's got any ideas of how I can make my life a lot simpler, then do feel free to tell me that in a minute. But yeah, so these, I do actually tune these glasses actually. What you can see here are these lines which are telling me where to tune them in terms of have water in them, but I'm not doing that today, so I'm hoping that works. So yeah. One thing I really wanted to do when I started to work with this, I didn't want to make these speakers. I didn't want the glasses to be speakers. I actually wanted them to ring. And so, yeah, there's quite a lot of sort of trial and error in terms of working out how to do that. So that's, I think hopefully everyone can hear that. I mean, they can get louder than that. And the other thing, obviously, you've got to be quite careful about not dampening the glass, and that's probably dampening the glass quite a lot. But yeah, you can hear that, so hopefully. And then that's going into my inputs. And again, I'm sending out lots of coal lists, basically telling it what kind of frequency shifting I want it to do. Yeah, that is working. So this, I mean, it doesn't sound very nice here because I've not calibrated it or done anything, EQ'd it or anything. And also it's not tuned, but I'll give you a kind of idea. If I can turn that up slightly. Is that the, does anyone know which one is the volume control on the mixer? I did tell you I was shit at mixers. I think, I don't know, I think the volume's changed in slightly. I'm definitely getting some feedback, so that's okay. Yep. Lawrence, can you do me a favour? Can you just come and hold that on there for me for a second? Just very lightly. Thanks. So yeah, basically I can yeah. So as I said, it's really, really simple. I'm just literally shifting frequencies, telling it when to do that, adding gratuitous amounts of reverb, and letting it play itself, basically. There's really not much else to say about that. So I'm going to switch that off, thank you. I will show you a little video of basically what the installation actually sounded and looked like. This is the first version. So this was Partita for Unattended Glass Harp 1. I don't know if anyone kind of, I like to sort of play with titles, and that is a kind of nod to Peters and Ovieff's Partita for Unattended Computer, which I think was performed at the Royal Festival Hall sometime in the late 50s or early 60s. But anyway, okay. So this is version 1. Okay, I'll see if I can find what I really like about this. Actually, you can see when you're filming it, you can actually see, sometimes you can see the glasses moving. There you can see the vibrations in the water. So yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to look at in terms of sort of a visual installation, but people do seem to be really interested in those kind of aspects of it. And then I will play you a brief excerpt of the latest version, which is Partita 2, imaginatively titled. There we go. I think I kind of spent a bit more time working on the presentation of this one. So I'll play it from about, yeah. So that gives you an idea basically of how that worked. In terms of future work, again, when I was performing live, I tended to use a lot more percussive elements, and I really want to kind of start to introduce that into the installations. But I need to kind of work out how to do that, probably using something like stepper motors or something. But yeah, that's something that's kind of in the works at the moment. Looking at further automation, different types of glass. As I said, I've got a very large collection of goldfish bowls at the moment, which is taking up quite a lot of room in my house. I've also been in talks with a glass maker in France. They sent me a really beautiful big glass bell that I want to do something with at some point. Definitely looking at different types of effects, basically using Max in a different way. So that's something I want to explore. And then possibly transferring everything to PD, because one of the things that I find really problematic about these installations is obviously I need to use a computer, and you know, when you're exhibiting, actually I did a proposal for something quite recently, and they said, oh, we don't have one, you can run it off, and so I had to budget that in, and you know, that takes up quite a lot of room in the budget. So I don't really want to move it to PD, but I think I might have to at some point.